Hello my friends, HM here. I make videos about topics that are important for whether the future of humanity will be better or worse. Today's video is the first part of 3 videos that propose and explain 16 improvements that Elon Musk's SpaceX could do to make the Shahed drone weapon truly revolutionary for modern warfare. I'll start the video by briefly describing what the Shahed drone is, and then move on to explain these 16 improvements that SpaceX could do. SpaceX should do this because a free and democratic part of the world unfortunately need these weapons to protect themselves against oppressive and authoritarian regimes like Russia and China. With that said, let's get to it. Chapter 2. What is the Shahed drone? The Shahed is an attack drone made by an Iranian company called HESA and officially entered service in the Iranian army in December 2021. Current Iranian production capacity is 150 units per month, and the buyers of it now is Russia, that has bought 2,400 of them for use against Ukraine. The weight of this drone is 200 kilo with a 45 kilo warhead. For comparison, the HIMARS warhead is 120 kilo and the rocket is 300 kilo. The HIMARS is an American-made rocket launcher system that Ukraine has used with great success in the war. The size of the Shahed is 3.5 meters long and a wingspan of 2.5 meters wide. And the flight height for the Shahed is between 60 and 4,000 meters. The 4,000 meters is important because at that height most anti-aircraft guns cannot reach it. The cruising speed is not high, it's 185 kilometers per hour. The HIMARS speed for comparison is 3,062 kilometers per hour. And that's one of the reasons that the Russians haven't been able to shoot it down, whereas the Shahed is much easier to hit because it's so slow. The range of this Shahed is 1,000 kilometers. The HIMARS range is 70 kilometers for the version Ukraine got, so significantly shorter range. Then I have this little video here I'll show you about how the Iranian Shahed presumably is taking off. So here we have it. It comes up from this truck. Here you can see it a little better. And here it actually attacks something, and you can see it's a very powerful explosion. Okay, and then we reach chapter 3. Why is the Shahed drone so great? The first thing that is so obvious is the low manufacturing cost of this drone compared to other weapons. Shahed only weighs 200 kilo and it's far simpler to build than a cheap automobile that weighs like 1.2 ton if it's made in metal like an automobile. I'd estimate that a 200 kilo composite drone like the Iranian one, that's likely distributed with those 45 kilo for the warhead that we know about, and then perhaps 100 kilo for the fuel, and then 55 kilo, that would be the remaining weight, and that's for building the drone itself. And if you make it in metal, it's more likely that, okay, we'll still have a 45 kilo warhead and it will still be 200 kilo for the total drone loaded with fuel, but then it will have only 60 kilo of fuel, so that's why I estimate it goes from 1,000 kilometers of range when it's into composite to about 600 kilometers in range if you make it in metal. And then the rest of the drone will be 95 kilo for the drone itself. Well, I've made an estimate that the Shahed drone will cost about $60,000 in low volume production when it's mostly hand built, and that's the Iranian version. The reason is composites takes a lot of time to build. You have to make a form, then you have to put some textile, carbon fiber or some other fiber in that form, and then you pour over some liquid resin, and then you have to bake that resin for it to harden. It can take hours to make a single sheet. Now, I want to show you how this can be done if you do it in an automotive factory style. Down here we have a little video that shows how a stamping press are making the sheets that could go on the side of the car or that could make up the wings of this Shahed. So let's look at that. Here it goes in the sheet, it's pressed, and then a few seconds later it comes out in its shape. So this goes really fast, and that's really affordable to make stuff like that. It will take hours to do the same thing in a composite material. And that's why I think the cost can go down to $6,000 if you make it like an automobile in metal. So that's 1/10 the price of what the Iranians are using. But in order to set this kind of production up, you need to produce a lot of units, or you won't be able to pay for the cost of all these expensive robots and stamping presses and stuff. So you need to make a lot of them. Iran only make about 150 per month, but in this car manufacturing thing here, you'd have to make 30,000 per month. So you can definitely build a similar style factory making these Shahed drones in metal and then get the price down to about $6,000, because a cheap automobile, you can build that for about $20,000, or that's the cheapest cars out there, and they're much more complex and will cost a lot more to manufacture. So the fourth chapter here is why SpaceX is uniquely positioned to make the Shahed drone even more revolutionary. I think I'll start by repeating the 6 improvements that I've stated in the previous slides, because it's good to refresh our memory with that. So the first one was to make a catapult launcher powered by an electric motor that winds up a pull cable for the drone, so same as in a modern aircraft carrier, and make that catapult system fit a standard 40-foot container to improve logistics on the battlefield. And the second improvement was that it should also be able to launch using a landing gear that's also mounted at the same place that this launch rocket can also be placed. And there can be 2 ways to use this landing gear. Either it's just dropped off the landing gear immediately after takeoff, because then the range of the Shahed will be longer. It'll be the full 600 kilometers. Or if you suspect that the mission might be aborted or something during the flight, then it should be able to return home and land using that landing gear and then be refueled and used for another time. That would require communication with the drone, and I'll talk about that shortly. Otherwise you couldn't abort a mission. A third improvement could be, that's the most important one, to mass produce a Shahed using a metal frame and body and make it as we do in a automac factory, and then bring the price down to $6,000. That's very important, because that means you can mass deploy them by the tens and hundreds of thousands and even millions for a very large army. The fourth improvement I suggested was to use military GPS signals to increase accuracy to 30 centimeter or about 1 foot. And the fifth improvement was to make a variant that can also home in on radar and jamming signals. And if these signals are turned off, then the drone should automatically pick a secondary target instead using that GPS. The sixth improvement I suggested was to make the attack angle of the Shahed programmable in order to make anti-aircraft guns the least effective against the Shahed. Specifically, you could attack simultaneously from all sides or 360 degrees. It make it much more difficult for an anti-aircraft gun to shoot it down. Now, a new improvement I'll suggest right now is to decrease the wingspan of the Shahed to 2 meter and 38 centimeters, so it can fit inside a standard 2.43 meter width of a standard shipping container. And then 12 Shaheds could actually fit into such a 40 feet standard shipping container. And that will again make battlefield logistics a lot simpler if you can use standard containers and semis to haul these Shaheds around where you need them. And the Iranian Shahed, funny enough, is 2.5 meters, so it cannot fit a standard shipping container. That's a huge mistake they did there. This system here, you can just bring up to 12 of these Shaheds with each container, and you can place these containers all over the country and near a launcher, and then you can start launching. But there are many other things that SpaceX can do. The eighth improvement that SpaceX could do is that they could use Starlink to communicate with Shahed drone in flight using their new Starlink Block 2 satellites that enable low-speed internet connections using ordinary 5G radios that may add as little as $20 to the cost of the Shahed. It's also worth noting that Russia has been trying to jam and hack Starlink satellites in Ukraine, but they haven't succeeded. So one thing that I expect to be made on such a Shahed drone that can communicate with the Starlink system is that these 5G radios could be made directional, so they only receive radio signals directly from space, and they also only send out their own radio signals directly up in space, so that a jammer needs to be located between the drone and space in order to be effective. And of course, Russia don't have any jamming systems, unless of course they launch a jamming satellite system and that could do the jamming from space, but they don't have that. It would be a massively game-changing thing for a Shahed to be able to communicate in real time safely with the internet or via this Starlink system. One reason is that Shahed would be able to acquire a new target or new flight route if intelligence discover that a higher value target is available, or discover that enemy anti-aircrafts are active on the flight route that the Shahed has been programmed to follow. So just get another flight route in flight or another target to hit. Also, with live intelligence, Shahed potentially could be able to hit moving targets like tanks, armored fighting vehicles and trucks while they move, if you can get the information timely enough with new GPS coordinates where this tank is moving. Also revolutionary. And Shahed could also be ordered to abort primary target and go for secondary target instead if, say, intelligence discover that the target is no longer valuable, or there are many civilians at risk near the target that you don't want to kill at the same time. SpaceX should also make a surveillance Shahed. That would be improvement number 9. They could make a version of the Shahed that replaces a 45 kilo warhead with a 35 kilo warhead plus a 10 kilo package for optical and thermal cameras and batteries for surveillance. The Starlink Generation 2 satellites that SpaceX currently are launching for their Starlink constellation, they are using 1.4 GHz and 5 GHz radio bands, and they are capable of 3 megabytes per second to 7.2 megabytes per second peak upload Earth to space, and they're also capable of 4.4 megabytes per second and 18.3 megabytes per second for the downlink, that's space to Earth. Especially the uplink is important, because if it's an intelligence that gather information, then you want that uplink to be as powerful as possible. But 3 to 7 megabits per second is actually quite good. But it has to be understood that this is a capacity that is per hexagon cell that covers 379 square kilometers. And here we have a map of it, how Earth will be divided into these hexagon cells. And then there is this capacity for each of these cells. Of course, if you send up more satellites, there will be twice that capacity for the same cell, but that will require 2 satellites over this area at the same time. And that Starlink connection here is fast enough to transfer high resolution still pictures and also low resolution live video. So surveillance Shahed, that will cost more than those $6,000 that I said the quick and dirty Shahed would cost to make, because this warhead would add cost. In mass production, I don't expect it will add more than $1,500 more to add some cameras, and the thermal camera will probably be the most expensive thing. Ordinary cameras and a little zoom functionality doesn't cost much, and the batteries will not cost much at all. So the total price will be $7,500 for this surveillance capable Shahed, but it will still be able to strike because it still has a 35 kilo warhead with explosives. So it can do both strike and surveillance. And then we should also note that if you are flying this Shahed in a reusable mode, then of course it will have a landing gear so it can return home and be refueled. And that landing gear will probably also cost about $500. So total price will be $8,000 for a fully reusable surveillance and attack drone. It's still a super low price for a weapon that now has enormous capability. Also, it should be noted that if this Shahed flies with a landing gear, its total range will likely drop from, I'd say, 600 kilometers to 500 kilometers, and then its operational range, if returning to takeoff site, will be 250 kilometers. It's still a lot. It's not bad. Remember, the HIMARS missiles were only 70 kilometers, the range for these missiles, and they costed a lot more. Now, SpaceX can also do another improvement that will be enormously important. That's number 10 improvement here that I'll suggest. And that is that this surveillance Shahed should have the ability to navigate using uploaded visual maps of the landscape along its flight route, so it can reach and hit the target in case the GPS system is effectively jammed, which we don't think it can be, but it could be nuked. The Russians could decide to blow up all satellites in space. That will of course blow up their own satellites as well, and also China's satellites and India's satellites, so they will really be very unpopular in the world if they do that. But they could bring the whole satellite system down and basically also destroy Starlink's ability to communicate with the Shahed drones. But if they have this ability to navigate by maps, then they are still useful. These drones are not lost. They can still be sent out using maps that were already made or maps that are gathered by Shahed itself. They can be programmed to fly along a route and update maps, and then they can use these maps to target the enemy and hit targets still. The only drawback here is that in clouded weather, the Shahed would have to fly below the clouds to see the landscape, and then it risks being targeted by anti-aircraft guns because, well, clouds, I don't know how high they are, 2-3 kilometers, have to go down below those, and then anti-aircraft guns can hit it. If you like this video, I'd be grateful if you give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel, as that will help me enormously to make better content for you and others. Also, remember that this video is the first part of 3 videos that explain all the 16 improvements that SpaceX could do to make the Shahed drone truly revolutionary. To see the second part of this series, follow the link below this video. Thank you for watching my video. I wish you a healthy and fulfilling life in freedom and democracy.